It happened while the world was sleeping. January 3rd, 2026, 2 o'clock in the morning. For decades, Nicolas Maduro believed he was untouchable. He believed that the walls of Miraflores Palace were thick enough to keep reality out. He believed that the loyalty of his generals was absolute, and that the geopolitical chessboard would always shift in his favor. But at 2 a.m., under the cover of darkness, the illusion shattered. When the Trump administration gave the order, and the tactical teams breached the perimeter, the strongman of Venezuela discovered the most brutal truth of existence. Power is not a possession. It is a loan, and eventually, the lender comes to collect. Imagine the psychology of that moment. 1 minute, you are the supreme authority of a nation. You command armies. Your word is law. The next minute, you are face down on the cold marble floor, feeling the cold steel of handcuffs tightening around your wrists. In that singular second, the titles, the medals, the rhetoric, and the billions of dollars siphoned away. All of it evaporated. He was no longer El Presidente. He was just a terrified man in a room full of men with guns. The world is currently watching the news feeds with shock. They are analyzing the politics, the military strategy, and the implications for oil prices. But they are missing the deeper story. This is not just a political event. This is a philosophical inevitability. 500 years ago, a man named Niccolò Machiavelli wrote a manual for princes. He warned that a ruler can survive being feared, but he can never survive being hated. He warned that Fortuna, the goddess of luck, is a violent river. If you do not build dams and dikes while the weather is calm, she will destroy you when the storm comes. Maduro spent years mocking the storm. He thought he was the river, but today, the river drowned him. The fragility of the iron fist. Why do we find this image so captivating? Why is the world glued to the screens, watching the footage of a fallen tyrant? It is because it reminds us of the fragility of all human constructs. We build hierarchies, we build empires, and we convince ourselves they are eternal. But Machiavelli taught us that power is fluid. It relies on a delicate balance of virtue and the goodwill of the people, or at least, the absence of their collective rage. Maduro violated the cardinal rules of the prince. He plundered his own subjects not for the glory of the state, but for private greed. He relied on foreign mercenaries rather than his own people's love. He mistook patience for submission. To the uneducated eye, his arrest was a sudden, shocking operation by the United States. But to the Machiavellian observer, this arrest began years ago. It began the moment he started to believe his own propaganda. Hubris is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. For a long time, it kept him numb. But at 2 a.m. this morning, the anesthesia wore off. Today, we are going to perform an autopsy on this collapse. We are not looking at the politics of left versus right. We are looking at the mechanics of power versus gravity. We are going to use Machiavelli's lens to understand why this fall was mathematically guaranteed, and why, in the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. There is no middle ground. The king has fallen. Let us examine the corpse of his reign, the violation of natural law. To understand why Nicolas Maduro is currently sitting in a federal holding cell instead of a palace, we must consult the master in the prince. Machiavelli outlines a brutal but effective physics of power. He treats politics not as a moral endeavor, but as a structural one. Just as a bridge will collapse if you remove the keystones, a regime will collapse if you violate the laws of power. Maduro committed 2 fatal errors. 2 sins against the logic of strategy that made this outcome inevitable. Error 1, the threshold of hatred. Machiavelli famously wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved." If you cannot be both, dictators love this quote. They print it on t-shirts. They whisper it to themselves to justify their cruelty. But they forget the second, most crucial part of Machiavelli's sentence. But above all, the prince must abstain from being hated. There is a razor-thin line between fear and hatred. Fear is useful. Fear is discipline. Fear keeps the general from plotting a coup because he respects the consequences. Hatred, however, is reckless. Hatred burns down the fear. When a population is pushed past the point of survival, when they are starving, when they are watching their children die in hospitals without electricity, fear evaporates. It is replaced by a suicidal desire for revenge. Maduro thought he was feared. He was wrong. He was loathed. Fear requires a display of competence. You fear a surgeon who holds a knife. You do not fear a toddler holding a knife. You just panic. Maduro's regime was a display of incompetence so vast it became a caricature. When the US forces breached his compound yesterday, his internal security detail had a choice. A fearful guard fights to the death because he fears the king more than the invader. A hateful guard. He looks at the invader, drops his weapon, and opens the door. That is what happened at 2 a.m. The loyalty he bought with oil money evaporated because deep down, even his protectors despised him. He crossed the threshold of hatred, and in Machiavelli's world, that is a death sentence. Error 2. The illusion of the lion. Machiavelli describes two animals the prince must imitate: the lion to frighten wolves, and the fox to recognize traps. Maduro spent his entire career cosplaying as the lion. The loud speeches, the military parades, the aggressive posturing against the Yankee Empire. He projected strength, but it was a hollow strength. He lacked the qualities of the fox. The fox is cunning. The fox anticipates the changing winds. The fox would have seen the geopolitical shift. With the return of the Trump administration, the rules of engagement changed overnight. The diplomatic patience of the previous years was replaced by transactional aggression. A true Machiavellian fox would have negotiated an exit strategy months ago. He would have taken the gold and fled to a non-extradition island while the door was still open. But Maduro, blinded by his own lion costume, believed he could stare down the United States indefinitely. He failed to recognize the trap until the steel jaws clamped around his leg. He played a static game in a dynamic world. Error 3. The fatal reliance on auxiliaries. Perhaps his greatest strategic sin was his violation of Machiavelli's warning against auxiliary forces. Machiavelli warned, "He who relies on the arms of others is never secure." For years, Venezuela's regime stood not on its own pillars, but on the support of foreign powers: Russia, China, Iran. Maduro believed these allies would save him. He believed that if the Americans came, the East would start World War III to protect him. This is the delusion of the weak. When the order came from Washington yesterday, do you think Moscow or Beijing scrambled their jets? No, they calculated the cost. They looked at the ledger, and they realized that saving a failed, bankrupt dictator was not worth a direct conflict with a reinvigorated United States. They cut him loose. A borrowed shield is useless when the owner decides he needs it back. Maduro stood on a foundation of foreign promises, and when the pressure was applied, the foundation crumbled. He broke the laws of power, and now, gravity has done its work. The micro-dictatorships. You might be sitting there, watching the footage of the arrest, feeling a sense of detached superiority. You think to yourself, I am not a dictator. I do not run a country. This tragedy has nothing to do with me. But you are wrong. The scale is different, but the psychology is identical. Every human being harbors an inner tyrant. We all build our own little fiefdoms. It might be your household, your department at work, your relationship, or even the way you manage your own ego. We all fall into the same trap that Nicolas Maduro fell into. We mistake control for power. How many managers do you know who rule through intimidation, thinking they are respected, when in reality their team has a Slack channel dedicated to mocking them? How many partners try to control their significant other through jealousy and manipulation, thinking they are securing love, when they are actually breeding the resentment that will eventually cause the breakup? They are all practicing micro-tyranny. They are violating Machiavelli's laws on a smaller scale. And just like the fallen king, they are always the last to know when the coup is coming. The 2 a.m. moment. Maduro's 2 a.m. moment was a literal raid. But your 2 a.m. moment will look different. It will be the Tuesday morning when your boss calls you into the office and says, "We're letting you go." It will be the quiet evening when your spouse hands you the divorce papers and says, "I haven't loved you for years." In that moment, you will feel the same shock he felt. You will ask, "How did this happen? I was in control." But you weren't. You were just blind. You were relying on the illusion of stability while the foundation was rotting underneath you. You ignored the subtle signals of hatred, the quiet withdrawal of loyalty, the shifting winds of your environment. You thought your status was permanent. This is the seductive lie of the ego. The ego tells us that we are the main character of the universe. It tells us that bad things happen to other people. It tells us that we are immune to the laws of cause and effect. The Wheel of Fortune. Machiavelli wasn't just a strategist. He was a student of the Stoics. He understood the concept of the rota fortunae, the wheel of fortune. The wheel is always spinning. Sometimes you are at the top, basking in the sun. Sometimes you are at the bottom, crushed in the mud. The tyrant's mistake is believing he can stop the wheel. He believes he can nail it in place with force, with walls, with secret police. But the wheel is relentless. The arrest of a head of state is a violent reminder that status is not being. Strip away the sash, the guards, and the palace, and what is left? Just a biological organism, a frightened man. If a man who commanded an entire nation can be reduced to a prisoner in a single night, what makes you think your job title, your bank account, or your social standing is secure? The anti-fragile mindset. So, What is the antidote? How do we avoid the fate of the tyrant in our own lives? It is the opposite of hubris. It is paranoia, constructive paranoia. Machiavelli advised the prince to never remain idle in peaceful times, but to increase his resources with industry in such a way that they may be available to him in adversity. In other words, don't wait for the raid to build your defenses. Don't wait until your relationship is dying to show appreciation. Don't wait until the layoffs start to update your skills. Don't wait until the crisis hits to find your character. The fallen king falls because he becomes rigid. He stops listening. He surrounds himself with yes men who tell him everything is fine. If you want to survive the turning of the wheel, you must do the opposite. You must invite criticism. You must look for the cracks in your own walls before the enemy does. You must realize that the only thing you truly own is your own mind. Everything else, the house, the job, the reputation, can be rated at 2 a.m. The graveyard of arrogance. History is nothing more than a graveyard of men who thought they were gods. From Caesar to Napoleon, from Saddam to Maduro, the names change, the uniforms change, and the excuses change. But the ending is mathematically identical. The arrest of January 3rd, 2026, is not a tragedy. It is a correction. It is the universe balancing its books. It is a violent reminder that entropy always wins. We build our little empires of sand, and we act shocked when the tide comes in. We cling to power, to youth, to status, and we scream at the ocean to stop moving. But the ocean does not care. The strongman is actually the weakest man, because he requires the submission of millions just to feel valid. The moment that submission is withdrawn, he collapses. He has no internal skeleton. The wise man, however, builds his fortress inside. He follows Machiavelli's true advice. He adapts. He respects the storm. He does not rely on the love of the crowd or the fear of the end. He relies on his own capacity to endure. The final lesson. As the news cycle moves on, as the pundits start arguing about the trial, and the internet memes fade away, do not let this lesson go to waste. Do not look at the fallen tyrant with hate. Look at him with pity. He is a man who woke up from a 30-year dream to find himself in a nightmare. Use his fall as a mirror. Check your own foundations. Are you building on the fear of others? Are you relying on auxiliary forces, people or things outside your control, to make you feel safe? Are you ignoring the 2 a.m. alarm that is already ticking in your own life? Power is not about holding onto the throne tightly. Power is knowing that the throne is just a chair, and that you can stand up and walk away from it before they drag you away. The era of the iron fist is over. This is the era of the fluid mind. Be water, not stone. Stone cracks. Water survives. Most people are watching the news today for the drama. They want the dopamine hit of seeing a king in chains. They are consuming this event like fast food. But you watched this for the autopsy. You watched this to understand the mechanics of the machine. That makes you dangerous in the best possible way. It means you are building a mind that cannot be easily toppled. If you want to continue dissecting the reality behind the headline, if you want to understand the laws of power that govern the wolves and the sheep, then stay with us. Subscribe. The world is noisy. We are the signal.